Hello and welcome, my friends. It's Thunderbob here, and tonight we're going to be taking a look at Marvel's Midnight Suns. This is a strategy game from Firaxis, the makers of XCOM, that plays like a cross between XCOM, Slay the Spire, and Fire Emblem. I've been playing this game on my Steam Deck since release, and it's been a ton of fun. In this video, we're going to spend a few minutes talking about my thoughts on the game, also how it plays on both the Steam Deck and on a high-end PC in ultra-wide. And I've got some Steam Deck footage on the screen here. And to begin with, when this game actually works, it's an absolutely amazing experience on the deck. The controls translate perfectly and require no customization. It looks really beautiful, and very rarely do you run into any performance issues. You can basically lock it to 30 or 40 FPS, and you'll gain some consistency and improve the battery life. Now, this game is not yet verified for the Steam Deck, but other than 2 short sessions in my entire 65-hour playthrough, I played exclusively on the Steam Deck. But now we get to the issues. This game does have some crash problems on the deck. Initially it ran really well, and then there was a patch that came out and I started experiencing a ton of crashes. That would actually force me to reboot my entire Steam Deck. I never actually crashed during the gameplay sections, but rather during the scene transitions between a mission or a cinematic. There's a ton of steps I tried, but in the end, a combination of changes, which I'll outline in the description of the video below, ended up fixing my crashes. I ended up playing the last 30 hours of the story without another crash after making these changes. The other major issue is that while this game supports cloud saves, the PC and the Steam Deck store the save files in different locations. There's a workaround for this on the Steam Deck, where you create a sim link to the correct location, and cloud saving will work, and I'll also include that in the description of the video below. Don't expect this to work with the cloud saves out of the box, so you do need to do a little work to get it. But once you have the crash fix and the cloud fix in place, this game is a real joy to play. And I played probably 60 to 63 hours of this exclusively on my Steam Deck. Now on to the PC ultra-wide footage, and let's talk about the PC experience. I've actually found once you get the crashing fixed, the game initially runs better on the Steam Deck than the PC. This is mostly due to the shader cache issues that are resolved on the deck because it preloads these assets like you do on most consoles. On the PC, the first time nearly any animation runs, it freezes up down to single-digit frames at times, and there are a ton of unique animations that cause this. This is not something new, and I've run into this with a lot of games this year, and I think it really needs to be addressed by the industry. You'll need a pretty beefy rig to run this, especially if you want to run ray tracing and run the game at very high resolutions. Beyond the performance issues, this is a mostly good-looking game. It won't win any awards, but the animations feel like they're ripped right out of the comics. The world itself is serviceable, if a bit bland, but the characters look nice, and there's a ton of customizable costumes and looks for each of the different characters. The story here is that you are the Hunter, which is a semi-customizable superhero who has been resurrected after being dead for hundreds of years, who is also the son of Lilith, a great evil that wants to conquer the world, or so it seems. It gets more complex, but that is the main motivation of the game. For me, this is a Marvel fan's dream game, with a huge cast of heroes and an absolutely endless number of comic book references, callbacks, and Easter eggs. We'll grow attached to many of these characters, to the point that it feels like there should be some romance options, but the game leaves it strictly platonic. The basic structure of the game has you going on missions that you'll select from the table. You'll bring along 3 heroes. There's a good number of different objectives, but much like XCOM, you'll eventually have all of them memorized. Interspersed are story missions that'll move along the larger narrative and have more unique objectives. They'll have you interact with a ton of unique villains like Venom, Crossbones, and Sabretooth. Now, while there's a huge selection of heroes in the game, I actually felt like a few more big-named enemies would have been appreciated, as in the end, you might end up fighting some of these guys dozens of times before the game's over. The gameplay here is actually closer to Slay the Spire than XCOM in my opinion. While you do have the ability to move on the battlefield, it's much less important as there's no cover here. These are superheroes who are flying around and punching each other. Hiding behind walls wouldn't really make much sense, would it? Most of the movement is used actually to get in position to use your AoE abilities. That's not to say there's no strategy here. Pulling together card combinations and using your movement, redraw, and items at the correct moment lead to a lot of potential options. You can also think of the cards like a list of 8 abilities that you select for each of your heroes to bring into battle, that are then shuffled together. It actually gives you a ton more variety than the XCOM missions did on the individual battlefield. After you complete the mission, it's back to the Abbey, which is analogous to the Xavier Institute or the Avengers Tower if they are magically imbued cottages. You'll spend nearly equal time on the battlefield at the Abbey, to the point where it feels like a Fire Emblem or a Persona game, with all the characters hanging around and shooting the shit together. This is where the game becomes more complex, as the game introduces a ton of systems that start to feel like you're spinning plates at times. After each mission, characters will indicate they want to talk to you or hang out, which sometimes means speaking with 5 to 10 different NPC characters. Sometimes this is very meaningful, either by granting gameplay buffs or expanding the relationship you have with the individual character, but very often it's a quite shallow dialogue exchange. They sprinkle in a lot of backstory and lore, but after a while it became kind of overwhelming. There's like 65,000 lines of dialogue in the game. I definitely started to skim through and skip the less important moments. There are a ton of additional things to interact with at the Abbey. The most important of is the Forge, which is where you get new cards after each mission. You can craft new cards, you can research upgrades, and you can buy single-use items. This definitely feels like at the end of Slay the Spire, where it gives you a card option after a combat encounter. You actually can re-roll these depending on where you are in the story, get upgraded or modded abilities here. Then you have the training guide, where each day you can select a hero to train with and improve the hunter and another character's abilities and friendship. You also get the ability to upgrade your cards and mod your cards, which drastically adds to the ability to customize how they play. And finally, you have the War Room, where you can send your heroes on individual missions alone, where they will return with cards.
Ready for some hero work?
Each of these areas also have a ton of upgrades and research options, which adds additional functionality. This game has so many spinning plates and so many pieces to it, so many systems to upgrade and interact with. I'm not even getting into everything. There's clubs you can join, like the Emo Club, the Book Club, and the Shop class, which provide upgrades and some additional depth for some of the characters. There's a huge open world Abbey ground to explore that almost feels like a basic version of Myst, where you'll go and solve basic puzzles, unlock new abilities. It's just a huge area that you would not expect in a game like this. And just a huge amount of interactions you have with the other playable characters. You really get to learn about these characters, their backstories, where they are in the game world. And it's just really interesting. It's like XCOM was missing that piece of the puzzle. They had the gameplay down, but I really didn't care about any of the characters in any meaningful way. There was no backstory to them other than the name you gave them. And I think that really is something that this game excels at. And you may like it or you may not. There is a lot of cheesiness there and pieces that don't quite work, but overall I really enjoyed it. So, final thoughts. The game is definitely stuffed to the gills with things to do. While it might not appeal to everyone, the huge variety of gameplay elements means that if you're a fan of the genre, you'll probably find something that you like here. My personal favorite part is the combat and the depth of options that you get to customize each of your characters, and the ways you can bring those characters together in meaningful ways. I've put 65 hours into the game, and I still have a few personal objectives I'd like to complete before I uninstall, but I can definitely recommend the game to anyone who's a fan of Marvel games like XCOM, Slay the Spire, and lengthy character-driven games like Fire Emblem and Persona. So that's it. I do want to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please do like, subscribe, drop me a comment with your thoughts, and I just want to thank you one more time for watching, and have a good night.